Hello, I'm Malcolm Haslett.
And I'm Janice Baker. The Adelaide Fringe is about to hit Adelaide.
How does it all work in front of the public and behind the scenes? We have a panel to discuss that next on Our Time. Welcome to a special show.
Yes.
Are you excited?
I am.
Are you excited when the Fringe comes to town?
Always.
I'm excited that we're sitting on chairs instead of a usual...
Because you don't like those chairs that we normally sit in.
And we should also say this is the first episode of our program this year in 2019, and they said it wouldn't last.
There you go.
8.5 years ago this program began, and we're still going.
We're in our 9th year, that means, Malcolm.
Frightening.
I know.
And I'm only 26. Look, we'd like to welcome to this program our panel, and our panel consists of Danni Zappier, who is a first-time producer and actor and director in a Fringe show. Welcome, Danni.
Thank you. And also Kerry Marsh is a curator of shows. We have that right?
So they say.
Shakti is joining us, who's the artistic director of the Garage International at the Adelaide Town Hall. Welcome.
Thank you. Also, Peter Maddern is a writer, director and producer. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Katie Wright, Dynamite, extraordinary performer, who is also a Fringe compere and not a stranger to our program, having juggled knives over this very body. And the bit that you missed when we went to a commercial break was very interesting.
No.
And that's on our funny tape.
Let's not talk about it.
Let's not talk about that, no. Let's start with you, Danni, because the Fringe is coming to Adelaide in a couple of weeks. It's the biggest festival on this side of the planet. People say it's the second biggest festival, Fringe festival in the world. And you're doing it for the first time. How do you feel?
Well, I think equal parts exhilarated and terrified, really. I think as a first-time Fringe producer, director, actor, you know, two-woman show, you kind of don't really know what you don't know, I suppose, really. So I'm hoping that this round will survive, and then perhaps the next Fringe, when we put something else on, we'll, you know, continue to learn and improve. So any tips, people? I'm happy to
Hopefully after this chat you will have some tips, because that's the purpose.
Great.
Kerry, you've been around doing this sort of thing for a long time.
Yeah.
What started you off?
Actually, I have worked for a long time as a professional salesperson for something like 25 years in a major corporate, and I kind of got a little bit bored with the concept. So being able to stick some toes into the artistic world where it's a little bit different, that's where I kind of ended up driving where I want to go. So yeah, I still do that, but in a nicer environment.
But you're also re-instigating an environment.
Yep, so for the last couple of Fringes I've produced shows, or I've show-doctored shows. I brought one of the acts over from overseas the year before. This year I did some local talent. What I'm trying to do for this Fringe is create a hub and bring in 20 or 30 artists. So we've got 120 shows booked for next week to drive a venue. So yeah, it's gone from being, well, I'll just look after myself to, I think I can do a bit better than that. Yeah.
Shakti, you've been bringing people from all over the world for a long time.
That's right. I'm an old Fringe expert, I think. I started the Fringe in Edinburgh in 1994. And then after doing around 10, 15 years in Edinburgh, now I'm on the other side of the world in Adelaide. And
Do you live here?
Now I do. And it is the Fringe. And because of the Fringe that I'm here. I used to live in Japan, but before I used to live in Edinburgh and Paris and London. But then it was this one Fringe show in 2000 that started it all, and that's for another time.
And you fell in love with the city, though?
Not exactly the city. It was more in the shape of, you know, a person, a man.
Oh, right, okay. Peter, she pointed at you then.
I'm not the lucky person.
Peter, your background is?
My background was in business, law initially, and then management consulting, the financial world, trying to raise money for startup ventures. And I found that all a bit too hard and started to look into this about 3 or 4 years ago now.
And started writing?
And started writing.
Had you always written?
No, not anything like this before. We had to write a lot of material for raising money for ventures and so forth, and so one got into, for want of a better description, the storytelling business. But this was a very different avenue of outlet for creativity.
Are you enjoying it, or do you find it stressful, or are you?
Oh, I find the writing very enjoyable, very
Yeah.
stimulating, very rewarding.
Because you're alone.
Because I'm alone, and of course, Malcolm, everything I write is word perfect. But the producing and the directing side is something that I'm not very good at, and find much more taxing.
Right.
Well, that's interesting.
It is interesting. Now, Katie, you've had a fabulous career all over the place doing all sorts of things. Just run through a quick gambit of your life.
Oh my goodness. So I started with Sir Kids here in Adelaide, and then I went to uni, did a Bachelor of Contemporary Arts and Dance and Drama, and then Diploma of Circus, believe it or not. And then after that I started touring, and I've spent the last 15 years performing on the international street theatre and arts festival circuit.
And in this Fringe, what are you doing in this Fringe?
So I do a lot of emceeing. So I'm emceeing a Fringe-produced event called Fringe in the Mall, Unfold Fringe in the Mall, which is a showcase stage for artists to do excerpts of their show. So people in the mall can see like 10, 15 minutes of their show, sometimes even less, and get like a taster. It's like a taster stage.
And then they decide what they want to see,
Right,
obviously.
right, and they can go straight to box office and buy tickets from there.
That's a good idea.
Chat to the artists,
Yeah.
you know. So it's a really great stage.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
But you're also doing a show?
I'm also doing a show, and that's for the opening weekend, called Serpent Dancer and the She-Devils, which is a mixed bag, all-female lineup of variety.
I guess that's She-Devil's part, isn't it?
Right.
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 So daggers again, all the
All that,
sort-
all
can't
danger
wait.
and sex and fun and
Okay.
glitter and all that stuff.
Brilliant.
Okay.
So, from anybody, how important do you think Fringes and these festivals are in our community? Anybody, just jump in.
Well, perhaps I'll speak as an audience member because
Okay.
as I'm a first-time Fringe producer, there is something special about the Fringe in Adelaide, the Fringe time, you know. Even my non-theatrical type friends get a buzz out of it, and suddenly it's a big event and people go out and, you know, there's a extra burst of life, I think, and it is quite cohesive in the sense that it draws people out when they wouldn't ordinarily go out to those venues together or see things, we hope, something new that they have not, challenged themselves with before, maybe at a theatre or some, contemporary dance or something like that that they wouldn't ordinarily see. But there is a special vibe, I feel, during Fringe time.
I think you're right. I think that's what I get from some friends of mine that aren't really that interested normally in theatre.
Yeah.
I think once we have this happening, it is the whole atmosphere changes in Adelaide, and people that normally wouldn't go and see something would go.
Like
and
a
it's
car
like,
race.
Well, yeah, that's
far
right.
more
in the middle
exciting than that,
Well,
surely.
you've got to ask yourself, why have we got a car race at the same time as we've got this on?
Well, that's true.
It is very questionable. Kerry, with what you're doing, looking at acts and making sure that you've got commercial successes,
Yep.
how many commercial successes have you had and how many flops have you had?
I've never had a flop, touch wood.
You didn't push them over then?
No, last show I took on, if I can talk gross, they did 15,000 for the season. When I took them on the next year, they did 45.
Whoa.
So the difference in a show being valuable is where I come in as a show doctor to sort of say, I would review the show first to make sure it has potential. I'd ask them if their marketing plans, I want to see their budgets. If they don't have any of that, it tells me that they're not serious about what they're trying to do. They're more artists. And I worry when someone says to me they're an artist, because that generally means they haven't figured out how to pay for this. And somewhere along the line, someone has to pay for it. If it's a venue, they've got to pay staff, rates, taxes, power. It's a lot of money. So for them to almost have a dream, that's great, but what's the reality and how are you going to put that together so it works?
Peter, you just came back, as we were talking before, it's a while ago now, from Edinburgh, and you actually had issues with that, didn't you?
Yeah, going to Edinburgh is a very expensive business, and I think people, it's maybe viewed as the holy grail, the great achievement to take a show to Edinburgh, but I think you have to look at it in terms of what you're trying to get out of it. Is it something that's just a bucket list thing? Is it something that you're looking for references that will give you a chance to tour in Europe soon after? Is it something that you hope that you can piggyback off for further productions later on? But it's a very big investment to take a show to Edinburgh, even for a one-person show, and you have to sort of think very long and hard about that expenditure and that investment, and there's other things you can do with that sort of money.
What
Somebody
fell?
dropped their false teeth.
Shakti, you're a much more experienced proponent of Edinburgh than I. Your thoughts on touring to Edinburgh nowadays?
It's exactly as I said. You have to be prepared. You have to give it all. You just can't go there to have a good time, and you have to spend money because everything costs money, and there are 4,000 companies and artists there not fighting, but competing against each other. How do you get out there? And also, you have to go out there, meet people, big out flyers, postering, and everything. You have to be openly, aggressively active. You can't just sit back because you're great, and even you're great. And people know you're great, they won't come to see your show unless you call them in.
So it is, Shakti, it is a business. I mean, it isn't just a performance, it is the whole kit and caboodle.
And I find in Adelaide also that it's the same in a much smaller scale, but it's still the same. And you have to be ready to be businesslike, artistic-wise, friendly, and also very stern and practical in every way in order to succeed even a little bit.
Katie, have you found that?
Well, that's what I just find so frustrating about being an artist is like essentially I do, and it goes back to what you were saying, I want to just be an artist, but I've spent so many of my working hours doing, selling my show, making promotion, doing my website, reaching out to producers, directors of shows, this, that and the other, and it's boring as F. I just want to be juggling and hula hooping and creating, and I find it a really frustrating aspect of being an independent artist.
Well, we'll be back to talk a little bit more about this in a tick, and we'll just find out what the other opinions of this panel are for the Fringe. See you soon.
Here we are with our panel.
We are, and Katie was just saying how frustrating it is for a performer because performer skills is about coming up with the goods and not necessarily coming up with the business plan or the other side of it because it's not your skill.
Right. And I've had lots of people say I'm kind of naturally good at that stuff, like other artists. Producers probably wouldn't rate me, but other artists are like, you're great at that, Katie. Can you do all that sort of selling the show stuff? And then I find myself doing it. And the hours are out of control. They're ridiculous. And, when it comes to writing a grant and doing budgets and things like that, it's kind of like budgets. I can't even work my head out about budgets at all. You know what I mean? I can write the whole grant and all but then the grants are really kind of for people who can write. It's not people who can create and make work. They're given to people who can write good grants.
But are there people around that can help? As far as that, do you have people that you can turn to help you in that situation?
Yeah, I mean, there are people whose jobs are to write grants, but they're usually with the companies that can afford to pay them.
Oh, I
I'm
see.
just not usually in that
Not that
position,
way.
which is...
I think that the Fringe has shifted in the last few years, and I think there's a greater emphasis or a greater role for venues to now provide, and that is that they should be able to generate for their artists their own audience.
Oh.
That I think it's getting very hard for artists on their own in a big field like the Adelaide Fringe, let alone something even 3 times as large as Edinburgh, to be able to cut through. And I think there's increasing responsibility on venues to generate an audience for their shows and not just hire out the venue and hope they sell booze along the way.
Oh, Malcolm, how do you feel about that as a venue person?
Well, as a venue manager, there's 2 ways of looking at that. I think, and you probably have an opinion on this as well, Kerry.
I have a strong opinion on this one.
I think venues, particularly venues who live and work in this town, it would be the same for Melbourne, Perth, our job is to stay in business 12 months of the year. And unless Fringe performers have a background of genuinely being able to bring money in, what's the point? The product has got to be something that is going to be popular with the public.
But also I would say, just what Peter's saying, though, is the performers have to be aware, though, of what they're trying to achieve and not expect everything from the venue person. It really...
Well, there's a bit of
Just
both. I think there's a bit
yes,
of both.
Since I'm the artistic director of the the town Adelaide at the Adelaide Town Hall there,
Yes.
which I run during the Fringe, I also try to make it as affordable as possible, and I do curate shows. I bring in shows mainly from abroad who have never been to Adelaide, so it'll give them a chance. I'm also proud of Australia and Adelaide. I like to show the international audience,
Yes.
international artists, what a wonderful place and a wonderful, wonderful Fringe this is. I have a wonderful theatre. Anybody who can come in here, I make sure that they can perform in a stress-free environment. Because as an artist, I think that's one of the most important things. And I'm a performer, I'm a dancer myself. I have my show in the Fringe, in my theatre, which means if I'm happy with how the lights, the sound, and everything is set, all the other artists will also, because I have pretty much high standards and I'm pretty noisy there. But then also, I don't think the artists can expect us venue managers to do all the marketing. I will, and I am trying to help them as much as possible, but I also give them advice. I send out newsletters from 1 to 20. Do this, do this, do this. Have any questions? Ask me. Try this, try this. Okay, let's go for it. Okay, let's work together. So it's a communications between all the artists and the venue and the technical manager and the artistic director. If we work together, I think the lead up to the Fringe is an exciting process.
It's even simple in things like preparation in advance, enough preparation in advance. For example, through our venue, we have about 80,000 people go through over a 12-month period. If we haven't got that information to expose to that 80,000 people, Kerry, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, some of the things you brought up, and also in your situation. I have mixed feelings about shows in that if they are not coming with a product that I can sell, then I have to look at what I'm taking out. So am I reducing, let's say I have a social dance there or some other event on during the year, I have to bump them for this one item that may or may not sell. And if they're not doing any work towards the show to sell it, then it's kind of like, you know what, you're actually costing me money. And during Fringe, there's only, let's say there's 5 slots a night for a room, if you went from 6 to 11, something like that. So that's it. I can't, out of 1,000, 1,100 acts or however many's coming to town, I've got to find the right people that's going to fit my venue, fit my audience. So if I'm providing an audience, I want to make sure that's a perfect niche for them.
And that can do a changeover fast enough as well.
And it's not, we're going to take 4 hours. I don't need your 4-hour changeover. It needs to be 10, 15 minutes and gone, bump out. And be having that business smarts and stage presence to be able to go, this is how we operate. We're professionals. Everyone's professional.
The point that's been made here, which is interesting, I think, is a Fringe show or a festival show is a unique piece of work. It's not a big theatrical production. It's not 2 people banging tin lids together either.
Yeah.
It's a crafted piece that has a time frame, begins and ends. You can walk away, walk in, walk away. Katie?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say all the same things are going on for the artist as well. We're kind of going, we want that venue because we know we'll work there, and you know what I mean? All those sorts of thought processes are going on. But also it's kind of like, I know some people who will go to Edinburgh, for example. I know artists that will come to Adelaide before they go to Edinburgh to test out the show and run their show and get some reviews so that they know that they'll have a better run in Edinburgh. It's kind of like, we come before that, and then there's that, of course, the Edmonton Fringe in Canada, which is one of the next biggest fringes in the world next to Adelaide, underneath Edinburgh. So, and I think that's really special, going back to that conversation about Adelaide, is it has to be a small, how Edinburgh's such a small city, but it's obviously more populated than Adelaide, but it's taken over by the Fringe. Like the Melbourne Fringe, for example, I mean, as wonderful as it is, you can be in Melbourne and not notice it's on, but you can't be in Adelaide and not notice that the Fringe Festival.
Very true.
And that's what's so beautiful and unique about it. But that's why so many artists come here. But, so many artists come here and lose so much money, but they might get a good review, and then that good review helps them, and they kind of know the process, and you're saying you might not pick up a show unless it's got a good 4 or 5-star review and a bit of a run-in in another
my question
festival.
there would be not, does it have a review, but is it financially viable? So if you've got 1,300 shows or whatever Fringe is pushing out, is that too many? And something like 30% of comedy. So if you're a circus performer type, that's I think 2, 3, 4, 5% of the market of shows produced. So is it a Fringe, or is it kind of like, what do we?
Circus
is it like it's a comedy show?
And that's a really good question. Has comedy sort of overshadowed the other art forms within these festivals and fringes, Peter?
I think the Fringe has developed into sort of a contemporary arts festival. I have difficulty with the name of the label of it being a Fringe anymore, especially having had, albeit just 1 year's experience in Edinburgh, which clearly remains a Fringe. But when you have these big acts, Will Anderson and these other guys come to town, and you look through the music portion of the Fringe and see all these established acts coming to town, it's hard to sort of describe it as a Fringe. And I think the audiences are getting increasingly drawn to those acts. Yes, they're very good performers, but I think they're increasingly getting drawn to those acts because it's an easy ticket to buy. It's an easy show that you're going to get a good result from. You can go to dinner afterwards. And searching out new shows like Danni's and so forth at other venues is something people do less and less, in my view.
Danni, how do you feel? Are you feeling confident?
Well, a bit daunted, I think. A question for you, Kerry, is sure. How do you categorise a marketable show? What are you looking for?
What I would look for from you, if you said I have this idea or I have this concept, is what's your marketing plan? What does your audience look like? What back end have you got as far as have you got a mailing list? Have you done the show before? Have you got any other experience? There's a lot of people who have ideas, but being able to transfer them into something that makes value for you as well as money. So most of the shows I'll always ask them 3 things. What are the 3 things you're going to do? Yeah. Is it build your brand? Is it make profit? Is it create something else? Like if you don't have the 3 things top of mind, I wouldn't even have a conversation with you because it just says to me that you haven't thought that far enough ahead. And like we said before, I've got 6 slots that night. I'm going to have to give up something that's going to potentially make us money and keep the venue going for another 12 months or 11 months. Yeah. And it's too risky. Yeah. And if it's not known, if it's an art piece or something like that, it's kind of like, I just couldn't take the risk. And I think venues are struggling at the moment. A lot of the big hotels and pubs are closing down all over Adelaide. So it says to me that the whole drinking, like, I'll bring customers in and they'll drink. No, they won't. Yeah. So how do we pick up that lost revenue? It has to come through ticket sales. Yeah.
Okay, so here's just an interesting point because we're running out of time. The general public, who obviously everyone relies on to turn up, to watch the performances and to pay the ticket price to keep the venues open, I think the general public don't have a real understanding of this. They see the glamorous poster or the ads or the whatevers, but they don't necessarily know that all of this conversation is going on in the background. And just stay with us because we've got more in a moment. So we're just talking before the break about the difficulty of the public not really understanding what goes on behind the scenes. We only see the shiny bit up the front. And Katie, you were saying...
I was just saying that as a Fringe festival, it's not curated in the respect that it might be individually curated, like venues and stuff that we were talking about, different producers, but anyone can register for the Fringe, anyone. So from really big acts who are kind of famous to anyone.
Somebody who's never done it before.
Yeah, someone sort of super famous like myself, or the local dance school, or just anyone. So that's the thing. Yeah.
And a lot of people use the word Fringe to basically sell their product to their family and friends. So they can actually make reasonable money because they're working with a market they're already familiar with, which is very beneficial. But we were just talking in the break, how did the Edinburgh Fringe begin? Because the Fringe in Edinburgh, the first start of the Fringe there was that after the war, when there was all these strife and after destruction, the countries decided to unite with art. So each country sent a representative art ballet or opera or dance company or music. High art stuff. Yes, predominantly high art. Yep. To Edinburgh, and that was a festival. And there were 8 companies who rebelled against it, saying if the government's involved, it's not true. It's not true culture, art, or friendship. And these 8 companies, we don't know who they are or where they came from, but they created a sensation, and that was the birth of the Fringe. And so in that sense, but then Fringe is also like the fringe at the table. Fringe is something outside the ordinary. It's not mainstream, but is Adelaide becoming too mainstream? Yes, it's open platform, but what about the Fringe? Well, the interesting point is once government gets involved in something, it changes everything. Here too. And we talked last year with Frank Ford, who was the godfather of the Fringe, who's now really a godfather. it's a great loss to our industry,
Yes.
Frank's passing, but he talked about when he really got the Fringe together because it was outside of the Adelaide Festival of Arts and that's how it grew. Look, everybody, this has been a really interesting conversation and I personally don't want it to end. And I hope, have you enjoyed talking to these
Absolutely.
people? I'm just thinking at the moment what we should do is ask them back in our next program to talk more about the products that they're preparing for the Fringe that you'll be able to see wherever you are in Australia. You can come to Adelaide, as many people do as a tourist, to be part of the Adelaide Fringe, second largest in the world. Until then, thanks everyone
Thank
for
you
being
very
part
much.
of this. Come
Thank
back
you.
next week and we'll talk again. Janice,
Yes, take care.
we'll see you soon. Keep yourself nice till then. Bye.